The morning sun of Manila filtered through the treetops of Rizal Park, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the pavement where hundreds of Filipinos were already beginning their daily activities. Among them, a familiar figure walked discreetly, wearing only a simple t-shirt and running shorts, trying to remain unnoticed among the crowd. Manny PACQUIAO had chosen that park for his morning run, away from the flashes and buzz that always surrounded him, seeking a moment of peace before another intense day of training. At 45 years old, the legendary boxer still maintained the iron discipline that had taken him to the top of the boxing world. Each step was calculated, each breath controlled, a reflection of decades dedicated to perfecting his body and mind. His eyes, always alert, observed not only the path ahead but also the people around him. Children playing, elderly people doing Tai Chi, street vendors preparing their products for another day of work. The park was especially busy that Friday morning, as many families took advantage of the last day of the week to bring their children to play before classes. Groups of high school students also occupied some benches and grassy areas, some studying in groups, others simply talking and laughing loudly. The atmosphere was one of joy and tranquility typical of Filipino parks, where different generations met harmoniously. Manny slowed down his running pace when he noticed a larger group of young people gathered near one of the park's century-old trees. Something in their posture caught his attention. It wasn't the typical relaxation of friends having fun, but a palpable tension that he recognized very well from his youth days on the streets of General Santos City. His instincts, sharpened by years of experience both inside and outside the rings, alerted him that something wasn't right in that seemingly innocent scene. Pretending to adjust his sneakers, Manny positioned himself strategically behind a nearby tree, from where he could better observe the situation without being noticed. What he saw made his heart tighten in a way that not even the hardest blows from his opponents had managed to achieve. A girl of apparently 14 years old was in the center of the group, visibly uncomfortable and with tears in her eyes, while the other young people surrounded her intimidatingly. Her simple and patched clothes contrasted with the more expensive clothing of the other students, making it clear that she came from a family of limited resources. The girl, whom Manny would later discover was named Maria Santos, tried to keep her head up despite the tears that insisted on rolling down her thin cheeks. Her black, straight hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she firmly held a worn school backpack that had clearly seen better days. Her brown eyes, large and expressive, showed a mixture of fear and determination that deeply touched the heart of the champion who observed from a distance. The young people around her seemed to be between 15 and 17 years old, all wearing uniforms from an expensive private school in the region. The group's leader, a tall and well-dressed boy, gestured aggressively while pointing to Maria's backpack and then to his own brand-name clothes. It was evident that they were mocking the girl's financial condition, turning her poverty into a reason for cruel entertainment. Other students passing by the place looked away, pretending not to see what was happening, perpetuating the cycle of indifference that allowed such situations to repeat themselves. Manny observed how Maria tried to move away from the group, but was always blocked by one of the young people who positioned themselves in her path. The girl began to slowly back away, her breathing becoming faster and irregular, clear signs that she was entering panic. Her fingers gripped the backpack strap so tightly that her knuckles were turning white, and she bit her lower lip in a desperate attempt to contain the crying that threatened to turn into audible sobs. The behavior of the young people became even more aggressive when one of them tried to snatch the backpack from Maria's hands. The girl resisted, firmly holding her only possession, which provoked malicious laughter from the group. It was clear that they were having fun with her desperation, turning it into a kind of cruel game where humiliation was the prize. At that moment, the backpack opened and some books and notebooks scattered on the ground, some of them clearly used and with loose pages. Manny felt a wave of indignation take over his being. The memories of his own childhood returned with full force. He too had been that poor child, mocked for having patched clothes and second-hand belongings. He remembered the pain of being judged not by character or kindness, but by appearance and financial condition. At that moment, He knew he couldn't simply continue his run and pretend nothing had happened. His conscience, shaped by years of struggle and overcoming, wouldn't allow him to be just another silent spectator of that injustice. Manny took a deep breath and walked toward the group with firm but unhurried steps. His posture was calm and controlled, a reflection of years of discipline in boxing, but his eyes showed an unwavering determination. As he approached, some of the young people began to notice his presence, but didn't recognize him immediately due to his casual appearance and the fact that they were concentrated on their cruel activity. The champion stopped at a respectful distance from the group, but close enough for his presence to be felt by everyone. The first reaction of the young people was irritation, as if Manny were just another meddling adult trying to spoil their fun. The group's leader, a boy of about 16 with gelled hair and an arrogant expression, turned to the champion with evident contempt. It was at that moment that recognition began to happen, first in the eyes of one of the girls in the group, then gradually spreading among the other young people. The realization that they were in front of Manny Pacquiao, the national pride of the Philippines, caused immediate silence and a radical change in the atmosphere of the place. Maria, who had crouched down to collect her scattered books, looked up and also recognized the man who was there. Her eyes widened in surprise, and a mixture of hope and disbelief took over her expression. She had grown up hearing stories about Manny Pacquiao, not just as a boxer, but as someone who never forgot his humble origins and always helped the less fortunate. Seeing her hero there, at that moment of her greatest vulnerability, seemed almost too surreal to be true. Manny didn't say a word initially. He simply crouched down and began to help Maria collect her belongings, treating each book and notebook with the same care that he himself would like his belongings to be treated when he was young. His movements were gentle and respectful, and he even smiled slightly at the girl when their eyes met. This simple but deeply meaningful gesture communicated more than thousands of words could express. He was showing, through actions, that Maria deserved respect and dignity. The group of young people watched the scene in complete silence, shame beginning to take over their faces. Some of them began to back away instinctively, realizing that they had been caught in an act of cruelty by someone they admired and respected. The group's leader, especially, seemed to have lost all his previous arrogance, replaced by an expression of embarrassment and regret. Manny finally stood up, helped Maria to stand up as well, and then turned to the group with a serious but not threatening expression. Manny looked each young person in the eyes, one by one, creating a moment of personal connection with each of them. His expression wasn't one of anger or condemnation, but of deep disappointment, like a father who finds his children doing something he knows is wrong. He began to speak, his voice low but clear, loaded with an authority that came not from his fame, but from his life experience and wisdom acquired through decades of struggle and overcoming. He shared, without mentioning names or specific details, his own experience of having been a poor child who had also faced mockery and discrimination. He spoke about how cruel words can leave deeper scars than any physical blow, and how a person's true strength is not in their ability to humiliate others, but in their ability to lift up those around them. His eyes shone with an intensity that came from convictions deeply rooted in his soul. While he spoke, Manny observed how the expressions of the young people gradually changed. The initial arrogance gave way first to embarrassment, then to reflection, and finally to something that seemed to be genuine regret. Some of them began to lower their heads, unable to maintain eye contact with the champion, while others looked at Maria with new understanding. It was as if they were seeing her for the first time as a real person, with feelings and dignity of her own, instead of just a target for their cruelty. Maria remained beside Manny, still trembling slightly, but with a more upright posture than before. The champion's presence had given her a strength she didn't know she possessed. Her eyes were still moist with unshed tears, but they also shone with new hope. She looked at Manny with an admiration that went beyond fame. It was admiration for someone who had chosen to use his position to defend her when she needed it most. The moment culminated when Manny asked the young people to put themselves in Maria's place, to imagine what it would be like to be judged not for who they are inside, but for external circumstances over which they have no control. He reminded them that they were all students, all had dreams and aspirations, and that the only real difference between them and Maria was the chance of birth. His words touched something deep in the heart of each young person, planting seeds of empathy that would grow in the days and weeks that followed. In the days that followed the encounter in the park, the life of each person involved in that situation began to change in ways that none of them could have anticipated. For Maria, what had begun as one of the worst days of her life transformed into a turning point. Manny Pacquiao's intervention not only saved her from a humiliating situation, but also showed her that there were people in the world willing to defend the less fortunate, even when they had no obligation to do so. Maria returned to her small house on the outskirts of Manila, with a completely different perspective on herself and her future. She lived with her mother, a hard-working woman who cleaned offices to support the family after her husband's death a few years earlier. When Maria told her mother what had happened, they both cried together, not from sadness, but from a complex emotion that mixed gratitude, hope, and a renewed sense of dignity. Maria's mother had always taught her that poverty was not a reason for shame, but it had been difficult for the girl to believe that when she constantly faced mockery at school. Meanwhile, the young people who had participated in the bullying began to go through their own transformations. The group's leader, Marcus, came from a wealthy family that owned several businesses in Manila. He had always been spoiled and accustomed to having everything he wanted, developing an arrogant attitude toward those he considered inferior. But Manny Pacquiao's words continued to echo in his mind, especially when he looked at his own privileges and realized how cruel he had been to someone who didn't have the same opportunities. Another member of the group, a girl named Sophia, began to question her own actions and attitudes. She had participated in the bullying more due to group pressure than true malice, but now she realized that this didn't diminish her responsibility. Sophia began to observe Maria at school with new eyes, noticing how she was studious and dedicated, always with her assignments up to date despite her family's financial difficulties. She began to feel genuine admiration for Maria's strength of character. The school where they all studied also began to feel the effects of the transformation. Teachers who had witnessed the bullying but hadn't intervened began to reflect on their role in creating a more inclusive and respectful environment. The school's principal, when she learned of the incident through some students who had witnessed Manny Pacquiao's intervention, decided to implement a more robust anti-bullying program and create opportunities for students from different socio-economic backgrounds to interact more positively. 2 weeks after the incident in the park, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He sought out Maria at school and, with a hesitant but sincere voice, apologized for what he had done. They weren't just empty words. He explained how Manny Pacquiao's words had made him reflect on his privileges, and how he had used those privileges to hurt others instead of helping them. Maria, initially suspicious, gradually perceived the sincerity in his words and accepted the apology. But Marcus didn't stop there. He convinced his parents to help Maria and her family, not as condescending charity, but as a way to recognize the girl's value and potential. They offered a better-paying job to Maria's mother at one of their companies, allowing her to have more flexible hours to accompany her daughter's studies. Additionally, Marcus organized a study group where he and other school colleagues helped Maria with subjects she had difficulty with, creating an environment of mutual learning and respect. Sophia also took her own initiatives. She began inviting Maria to join her group of friends, initially facing resistance from some of them, but gradually managing to show that Maria had much to contribute beyond her financial circumstances. Sophia discovered that Maria had a natural talent for art and encouraged her to participate in school competitions. When Maria won first place in a painting contest, Sophia was in the front row of the audience, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The transformation wasn't limited to the young people directly involved. Other students at the school began to learn about the story through rumors and reports, and many began to reflect on their own attitudes toward less fortunate classmates. A spontaneous inclusion movement began to form, with students from different social classes beginning to interact more naturally and respectfully. The school began to have a more harmonious and welcoming environment. Maria's mother, moved by the positive changes in her daughter's life, decided to write a letter to Manny PACQUIAO, thanking him not only for the intervention that day, but for showing her daughter that she had value and deserved respect. She explained how that moment had changed not only Maria's life, but also her own, giving them a new perspective on the future and the possibilities that were available to them. Maria's mother's letter reached Manny PACQUIAO's hands through his team, and the champion was deeply touched to learn of the lasting impact his intervention had had on the family's life. He decided to personally respond to the letter, inviting Maria and her mother to visit his training center, where he maintained various social programs for underprivileged youth. The visit was scheduled for a Saturday, and both Maria and her mother were nervous and excited about the prospect of meeting again the man who had changed their lives. During the visit to the training center, Manny showed Maria and her mother the various programs he maintained to help youth from underprivileged communities. There were boxing programs, but also school tutoring classes, art and music workshops, and even a scholarship program for talented students who couldn't afford to pay for quality education. Maria was especially impressed with the art studio, where young people like her could develop their artistic talents without worrying about the cost of materials. Manny offered Maria a full scholarship in his youth development program, which included not only educational support, but also mentoring and opportunities to develop her artistic talents. For Maria's mother, he offered a job at the center, coordinating support activities for the families of participating youth. It was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to be part of something bigger, to help other families who were going through the same difficulties they had faced. News of Manny PACQUIAO's generosity spread quickly through Maria's school and the local community. Marcus and Sophia, inspired by the champion's example, decided to volunteer at the training center, helping with tutoring classes and recreational activities. Other students from the school also began to become interested in the social programs, creating a wave of youth volunteering that benefited not only Manny's center, but various other organizations in the region. The transformation that had begun with a simple act of kindness in a park continued to expand, touching lives and creating positive changes on a much larger scale than anyone could have imagined. Maria's school implemented a peer mentoring program, where more privileged students helped less fortunate classmates, not only academically, but also offering emotional and social support. The program became so successful that other schools in the region began to implement similar initiatives. 6 months after the incident at Rizal Park, the lives of all the people involved had been transformed in profound and lasting ways. Maria had become one of the most respected students at her school, not only for her excellent grades, but also for her kindness and determination. Her artistic talents had flourished in Manny PACQUIAO's program, and she had already won several awards in regional art competitions. Most importantly, she had regained her self-esteem and developed a confidence that would accompany her for the rest of her life. Marcus had become an active advocate for the rights of less fortunate students in his school and community. He used his position of privilege to amplify the voices of those who were often not heard, and had developed a scholarship program through his family's company. Sophia had discovered her passion for social work and had decided to dedicate her career to helping youth in vulnerable situations. Both had learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Maria's mother had found not only financial stability, but also a renewed purpose in her life. Working at Manny PACQUIAO Center, she had become a mentor for other mothers facing similar difficulties, offering practical and emotional support based on her own experience of overcoming. She had become a respected figure in the community, known for her wisdom and compassion. Manny PACQUIAO continued his normal training activities and professional commitments, but carried with him the satisfaction of knowing that a simple act of kindness had created waves of positive change that continued to expand. He had learned, once again, that the most important moments of his life weren't necessarily those spent in the rings or in front of cameras, but rather those in which he used his position to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. Maria's story and her transformation became legend in the school and local community, inspiring other people to pay attention to acts of bullying and discrimination around them and to intervene when necessary. The school had become a model of inclusion and mutual respect, visited by educators from other institutions who wanted to learn about how to create more welcoming environments for all students. Most importantly, the experience had shown everyone involved that small acts of kindness can have extraordinary consequences, and that each person has the power to choose to be part of the solution or part of the problem. The legacy of that day at Rizal Park would continue to live not only in the lives of the people directly involved, but in all the lives they would touch in the future, creating an endless cycle of kindness and transformation that would spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. The deepest lesson that everyone learned was that true greatness is not in being superior to others, but in using our position, whatever it may be, to lift up those around us. Manny Pacquiao had shown that being a true champion means much more than winning fights. It means fighting for justice, defending the vulnerable, and never forgetting where we came from and where we want to go as a society. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.